Welcome to the Lead the Room podcast, where we help those with great ideas and brilliant minds to become amazing leaders and build teams full of purpose, connection, creativity, and courage, transforming people's experience of workplaces and leadership. In 2018, we decided that the leadership playbook we saw around us wasn't working for the needs of our teams and our organisations, or frankly for us. So we ripped it up, built a new one, and watched the incredible impact that came from leading in a completely countercultural way. This journey transformed our experience of work, team culture, delivery, and felt so good to us. And our approach has served us and our teams in the good times and the tough times alike. So now we're here to share our stories and experiences with you all so you can become the leader you want to be. Build teams that deliver amazing things in amazing environments and inspire those around you to do the same. You and your leadership are what our workplace and people desperately need. We'll be laughing, crying, and learning together. So let's get started. So here's the thing, Lyndsey. I love my job and I am here for it. But you know what? I'm also not. Like, I work hard. We've built an incredible team together and we deliver so much. But a key part of our success is that we don't work all the hours. We're really clear together on what needs to get done. We do it and we even have fun doing it. And then we go home and get on with our lives. We rarely answer emails past 5 p.m. unless something truly terrible has happened. We rarely answer emails past 5 p.m. and something really terrible has to have happened for us to be online in the evenings or at the weekend. You know, for me, I've got 2 young children, a fabulous wardrobe to sew, a Christmas sweater that's not going to knit itself, and a husband to hang out with. I don't need to be spending any more time at work than I have to. And actually, the more time I spend at work, the less productive I get. Like coming home, taking a break, having these habits, having, an enforced end time to my day helps me be more productive and get more done at work.
I mean, gosh, this is so healthy to hear you say this. And hopefully, I just want to hear more people say this, because that's like you saying, yeah, we're good at our job. I love my job, but I also have a life and I also want to sew my wardrobe. For those of you who tuned in last week to our episode, you will see Briony was wearing an amazing kimono, which she hand sewed herself. She'll give you a little twirl next time. Amazing. Not available to purchase, are they, your clothes yet?
Not available.
Not yet. Okay, it's coming soon. Lead the room line. But yeah, I think this is so important, and actually something that not many people speak about that often, because unfortunately I think there are so many of people who are not in the space that you just described, Bryony. And actually, because of that, there's very little resilience in their teams, and a massive risk of burnout really quite quickly and early on in your career, which it is terrifying, right?
You're so right, Lyndsey. And there's loads of statistics out there that say, 60% of staff feel completely used up at the end of the workday. And that is a real indicator that if people carry on like that, they are going to end up burnt out. It is endemic in our workplaces, and so often we see leaders wearing or teams wearing this presenteeism, inbox zero, long hours as a badge of honor. Well, I came in at 6:30 this morning and I stayed till 6:30. No, you don't need to be putting in that much work to get stuff done, and that's at Lead the Room. We really take a different view, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, when we speak about being intentional and intentionally creating a culture, these organizations and these teams that operate like that, it's within their gift to change that. You don't have to be working like that, because again, we see studies from across the world, different countries taking different approaches. Some of the most productive people are not working however many hours, 40, 50 hours a week. Some of the most unproductive people are working those hours. The number of hours doesn't equate to productivity, sometimes quite the opposite. But it is within your control as a leader to influence that culture from quite early on.
But I think so many people don't feel that that's actually the case. So many leaders I speak to, feel like they're just responding to the culture that's around them. Like they don't want to show up for all of these hours. Like they don't want to be working a 60-hour week, a 70-hour week. They don't want to have lost all their hobbies or have like cancelled dinner with their friends again because of some work, drama. But they don't feel it's in their control to say enough. Like I will not live my life like this. And I think but it's so powerful when you see leaders doing this, because it gives permission to the team to then also, prioritize and find balance in their life. Like if I was working 70 hours a week, then the message I'd be sending my team is like, implicitly, I'm expecting you to work 70 hours a week. And even if you see these leaders who say like, well, just because I'm working these hours doesn't mean you have to. Or one of my pet peeves, that email tagline, I've responded at a time that's convenient to me, but don't feel under pressure to respond, or please respond at a time that's convenient to you. You're like, this is just another way to feel under pressure about and to be on all the time at work.
And it's not okay at all. So if you're feeling kind of close to burnout, or you just want to avoid ever getting yourself into that situation, or you need to get kind of back on track, then stay tuned to us, because we've got you. So Briony, have you ever experienced something kind of close to burnout in your career?
Yeah, of course. Like that story that I painted, or that picture I painted at the start of the podcast, like that's where I am now. But like a year ago, 3 years ago, like it would have been a completely different story, and it is such like for me, it's something that I have to keep working at. I like working and I like to do things well. Like I have to actively keep in balance all the time, my resilience and my work-life balance, so that I don't burn myself out. And I can just really vividly remember when I came back to work after parental leave with my first child, like you were talking about last week in your walk the week, like I didn't make that adjustment of like, actually, I've got a whole new set of responsibilities. I need to rethink the system of my life so I can actually find balance and make this work. And so I just carried on like full pelt at all aspects of my life, being a mum, being a partner, being a colleague, being a leader, being a sister, being a friend. And I ended up after like 6 months with this like awful anxiety, and I would like burst into tears for no reason. I felt so stressed. I was having all of these like physical symptoms. I was just completely burnt out. I was completely burnt out from trying to do everything at 100% and everything in the same way that I had done before, when my life had completely changed. And so, look, I'm not immune to this. I'm really not. And there've been other periods of life at work where at times things are going to get busier, and you want to be able to lean in and sprint in those moments. But then sometimes I'm not great at being like, right, well, that was a 2-week sprint where I did work 70 hours a week. Now I'm going to only work 30 hours a week for the next 3 weeks to recover from that, because the sprint is over, and sometimes I can just keep sprinting. So I definitely, for me, that's like, again, coming back to that intentionality, I really have to keep it in check, because otherwise I know I end up on the wrong side of burnout.
And so that's a really good example. And so being someone who you could quickly slip into that sprint mode all the time, and slip into kind of nothing's changed, this is just who I am. How do you, I guess, what do you have in your life? Because that's going to be hard for you to just control that on your own. Do you have others around you to kind of check you, to be like, Briony, like, I think we need to kind of just slow down, or like kind of rebalance things? Because it's hard to do alone, and it can feel really lonely doing this.
Yeah, so I think that's what we're talking a bit about today, is those, for me, one of the key things is having habits and routines. So I start work at a really fixed time most often, and I end at like, so I start about 8:30, and most days I finish at 4:30, like no matter what. Like if stuff hasn't got done, it hasn't got done. I'm going home and I'm taking the kids to karate or hanging out with them. They've got some kind of creative project for me to get involved with or whatever. But so that's one way that I manage it. And then I also have things like I really try and prioritize getting out of the office and like taking a half-hour walk at lunchtime, because I just find it really resets me. Or like on a Wednesday, the office runs like these exercise classes, and so I'll go and do that. And just making sure when I'm setting out my week, I've really planned in those habits that are going to help build my resilience and keep the amount of work I'm doing in check, really help me. And then you're right, like I do also always say to my teams, like, truly I believe we should not be working all the time and we shouldn't be pushing ourselves too hard, but this is a journey for me, and I need you to tell me when I'm not showing up and I'm not living that value. Can you please tell me? And they really do. So quite often they'll say to me, like, we've had a really big week with a conference, like, are you taking tomorrow off? And there's only so many times I feel that I can say, like, no, I'm all right, I've got the weekend, because I feel guilty about not living up to the commitment and the value that we have as a team of like pacing ourselves. So I don't, so I like, so now I'll tell them, like, we've got the really big conference coming up and I've booked the next day off. And they're like, oh, well done, Bridie. Because, and I love the playfulness that comes in there, and like the accountability that we have as a team to that, and how they really help me out with that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. But that speaks volumes to the culture that you've created within your team, that they feel that they're able to say to you, Briony, like, you've done a lot of hours this week, are you going to take that day off? You had the Whereas there'll be so many people thinking, I could never ever say to my leader, to my boss, you've worked 50 hours this week, 60 hours, are you going to take some time off? That's a ridiculous amount of hours. Because the response might be, well, but that's what we're here to do. That doesn't, we've got to work. Well, but it is a marathon. Like, that's not. My I try and think in my head is, it's never complete. We're never going to complete our jobs. Like, that's not. You're not completing the game of life, or the game of whatever your job is. Like, it will always be there tomorrow. And unless you work in a role that is some kind of life and death consequences, not for doctor, like obviously people in the medical profession and loads of other professions, and you have got strict hours that you have to be at work. Obviously, you can't just walk out of a classroom if you're a teacher, whatever it is. Like, it will be okay and it will be there tomorrow. But you have to demonstrate that to your team, that put it down, finish that tomorrow, go home, recharge, rest and recharge. It's so, so important, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And so what about you, Lyndsey? Like, how have you experienced burnout, and like,
So
have you
actually,
experienced it?
so I'd say I haven't, because I actually almost think I haven't experienced something. Well, I haven't experienced burnout, perhaps slightly close to burnout. And it was related to last week's episode about kind of wanting to do all the stuff. And in my first management role, I was absolutely, I'd gone from being a member of the team to then leading the team. So I thought I had this huge amount to prove, that people were like, well, what makes you so special that you're now leading us? What makes you different? So I had to kind of demonstrate, well, obviously I'm so much more productive, and like, I've got so much more knowledge and all these different things, which was utter rubbish. I didn't have any of those things. I wanted to do the job and I had the skills to do the job. That's why I got the job. But I felt like I had to prove myself. I also did not trust people. I didn't trust people. And this was not trusting people to, when I was asking them for answers on certain things, I didn't trust the answer that they were bringing me was accurate. So I would go and do the work myself.
Wow.
To find out if the answer was actually correct. Okay.
Yeah.
They had given me no reason, like, to distrust them. It was just my default position. I don't trust people. Which you cannot be in that position being a leader, which I quickly found out. So I think the combination of all those wanting to do things, wanting to do everything myself, having to prove, not trusting, it was absolutely exhausting. I was commuting quite far to come back and forth to work. Things at home weren't great. Like, there was just a lot. And it actually took my leader to step in and say, stop. Like, he stepped in at the time and said, like, this isn't working. Like, the way that you're approaching this isn't healthy for you or your team, and it's not sustainable. And And I will always be, I mean, he's definitely the best leader that I've ever had, but I'll always be so, so grateful for that moment when he stepped in and said, no, this isn't how you, this isn't how you lead, and B, this, like, you're going to kill yourself because this isn't okay.
Yeah, and it's so easy in that moment, isn't it, to like be defensive and be like, well, no, this is just the way it is. Like, you've told
Yeah,
me I need to deliver this, so this is the way I've
yeah,
chosen to do it. But I think it really, again, it speaks to the importance of really building up trust and psychological safety, which we're going to come on to in a later
huge.
podcast, with your staff, so that you can give them that challenge and give them that feedback that you know is going to help them
Yeah,
and make their life better, even though they might not really appreciate it or be able to see it for themselves in the moment.
yeah. Because I wasn't, like, on the surface, I was
Yeah,
doing a good job. Like, I
yeah,
was doing a really good job, but behind the scenes, it was absolutely destroying me.
yeah,
But I think since then, particularly now when I think about the roles that I've had since, my career since, I, when we speak about boundaries, I also kind of really look at the priorities of my life. And when we just
yeah,
spoke there about kind of, look, is this going to matter, like, in 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 years? I look at kind of the here and now priorities of my life. And for example, I have a grandmother who's just turned 90 now. She may be in my life for some years more. There's a good chance that she's not. She is a huge priority to me in my life.
yeah,
So to be able to come home from work, to spend time speaking with her, like chatting with her on the phone, writing letters to one another, she is a huge priority in my life at the moment. So I need to, like, it's not just about coming home and watching Netflix and chilling out. Like, it's
yeah,
absolutely about prioritizing, to me, what is important in my life at this season in my life. So yes, the job, I'm going to work probably for a long time in my life, but at the moment, actually coming home and having that call with my grandma, to me, is more of a priority than staying later and having another meeting that I
yeah,
can do tomorrow. And
yeah,
I'm very strict about, and I'll say, like, because people are very inquisitive as well. I don't know if you find, Bryony, people are like, oh,
yeah,
what you got on this afternoon? Why are you leaving? And I'll say, I'm going to call my grandma. And some people are like, oh, what, can you do that, like, later after that meeting? I'm like, no, I want to do it now, and there's nothing stopping me. I'm going to go home and do it now. So
yeah, yeah,
I definitely encourage kind of thinking about, yes, about your own kind of resilient, but what is it? And we'll come on to kind of how you kind of build your own resilience and your habits. But for me, spending time and connecting with people that I know potentially will not be in my life for much longer is a huge priority, and fills me with joy to make me a better person and leader.
yeah. I really, that's so powerful, isn't it? Because what I'm hearing from you is that, you've got to be clear on what your life priorities are. And I
Yeah.
think that is where people come unstuck, isn't it? Because they're not clear with themselves as leaders. Like, what are my priorities for this month? What are my
Mm,
priorities for this week? Like, if I could only spend my time on three things, what would those three things be?
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think there's a job there, isn't there, to really be clear on what your priorities are, and then make sure, I'm going to get into to the tips in a minute,
Mm,
make sure that you're actually making time for those things. But
yeah.
yeah,
And just before we
yeah,
move on to this next Friday, I'm just thinking and reflecting. I definitely felt, as when I was a leader who, I guess, I was single, I didn't have any family, I felt I have no reason to leave at 5 o'clock. I've got no
yeah,
reason not to finish this report. Like, if someone said to me, "Oh, what are you going home to do?" Like, first of all, it's none of their business. But
mm,
B, like, I felt I had to justify why I was going home, as opposed to be like, because I want to. Like, it
yeah,
doesn't matter. Like, it shouldn't have to be, you have to collect children, you've got to
yeah,
take someone to an appointment, whatever it is. Like,
yeah. I've
it's
got my life to
ultimately,
live.
yes, and that life is not dictated around
Yeah,
pickup times, or taking people to classes, or it's your life, whatever stage of life you're in. And we have been through, as leaders, that every seasons of our life, from being single, no family, to, yeah, with family, like, everything is a priority. But it's in that moment, it's in that season of life, that is your priority, and be clear on what your priority is in that season, and it's all
yeah.
valid.
Yeah. And, so I hope you can hear, listeners, that, we're in this with you. Like, we're not
Yeah.
immune to burnout. And honestly, like I said, if I didn't have what I call like my healthy habits, my
Mm.
resilience routines each week, like I'm going to quickly come unstuck. And so, you know, daily and weekly habits are really important for resilience. And if you want to explore that a bit more or be clearer on what your priorities are, identifying them and then making time for them, then we would really love it if you would rate and review the podcast, and we will send you our free 90-day leadership refresh as a thank you. And in that, you're going to find all of those exercises and an audio guide to help you uncover your priorities and to think about your habits and routines. But let's get into some tips, Lyndsey.
Hmm.
How can our leaders think about managing burnout in their life?
Yeah, so I really kind of, again, these are not complex things, but they got to be intentional and consistent with them. So the first one about kind of just an auditing your time. So take a step back and look at absolutely everything that you're doing, and really kind of question yourself about kind of, was that a good use of your time or
Yeah.
wasn't it? And kind of audit that, rate it, like, yeah, actually that wasn't a great, actually that was a really good use of my time. Really look back and think, what is it that's taking up most of your time? Because
Yeah.
sometimes we're going through the motions of the week and you're not even really aware of what's sucking up that time. So have a look, see what's taking most of your time. Is that right? Are you using, because time is your most valuable resource in this, right? So are you actually spending it on the right things? Do you have time for some of that deeper work on things that are going to add the most value to you and your team? If not, why not? What could you change? And when you step back, it's really interesting, isn't it, Briony? Because you often start to see those kind of patterns and behavior that are really actually quite hard to spot, like on a day to
Yeah.
day basis. But when you just step back from that, you're like, oh gosh, I didn't realize that this was kind of happening. And then once you see those patterns, you can totally ask yourself, like, okay, what is it that we want to change and how are we actually going to do this? Now, you can do that individually, you do it as a team, and it is a wonderful exercise to do, not just once, but kind of keep doing it to really keep a check on how you're using your time.
Yeah, great one, Lyndsey. I really like
Yeah,
that. It's a great place to start. And so then
absolutely.
the second tip that we've got for you all is to really think about those habits that you're building into your everyday life that are going to support your resilience and to keep burnout away from you. So whether that's like I have, like a set start time and a set leaving time, whether it's building in a set bedtime so you get enough rest, whether that's going to the gym on your way to work so you get your exercise in, or whether it's making time for that dinner with your friends each week, or prioritize making sure that you leave work with enough energy so that you can do the hobby that you love, right? Think about those habits that are really going to build resilience in your life. And if you're not sure what they are, then like we've said in some of our other episodes, just start somewhere. Like identify 3 things that you could try out for a month and see if they make a difference. If they don't make a difference, find 3 other things, try those out. But don't make perfection be the enemy of good enough, and like just make a start and see what happens, because really understanding those habits, those foundational habits that you can put into practice every day, every week, is going to make so much difference to your resilience, because it's those small moments that actually build your resilience, rather than if you're just hanging on for like the 2 weeks leave you've got in the summer, it's not going to be enough. You're going to be burnt out by then. It's the half hour, the 15 minutes that you invest in yourself every day that will make the big difference.
Yeah. And it's really interesting you just mentioned on kind of hanging on until leave. The amount of people, particularly leaders that I see, that get to starting their annual leave and then they get sick
Yeah, yeah,
because they're running on empty, because
yeah,
they haven't, they're waiting, oh yeah, yeah, I'll recover. And they spend their holidays all sick
yeah,
because
yeah,
they
yeah.
haven't actually taken those times, built those foundational habits, like you've said, Bryony. So yeah, so important, isn't it?
Yeah, really important. And so, Lyndsey, wrap us up. What's our third tip?
Yeah, so the tip one, and I think, Bryony, you've kind of like alluded to this in terms of your kind of life one and life two with your different paces and your sprints, haven't you? About kind of about having your weeks in life kind of one and two. So now your life one is when things are like quite a normal pace. And you're kind of maybe doing your kind of regular hours, things are going good. And life two is when you're having one of those weeks that is just far more full on and busy, and you're very, very aware of that. And the idea is that first of all, that you should not be living your life at life two all the time. That's not sustainable. That's not healthy. It's absolutely going to lead to burnout. But you're consciously recognizing that the kind of week that you're in. So really understand, okay, well, what kind of week is it this week? Okay, well, this week feels like life one. That's good. I know that next week, because there's got things on in the evenings, there's a big conference, it's going to be life two, isn't it? Like it's full on. Okay, building more things in. How am I going to recover from that? But being alive to it, like really consciously and intentionally knowing how you're going to adapt your habits, those habits that Briony mentioned, how you're going to kind of use them, employ them in those different moments to make sure that you're not just surviving on that life two, because it's not just about survival mode to get through. The resilience that you have built up in life one gets you through that kind of life two, so that you can actually thrive during that week. It's not a survival mode.
Yeah, and the thing that I've even done for myself is like I've made a list and I sort of set myself a challenge on Life 2 weeks where I have to find each day 2 15-minute slots where I'm going to pick something from the list, which are like my mini resilience boosts, like have a cup of tea and enjoy and only have the cup of tea. Like don't read anything, don't respond to email, just sit and enjoy the cup of tea, or take a really short walk outside, or listen to your favorite podcast on your commute in, or sing or dance or whatever it is for 15 minutes. But because you always can find 2 15-minute slots in your day, even in life too. And so I think it's really about, like you say, it's being cognizant of like what week and what mode you're in, and then still making sure that you're prioritizing some of those resilience building habits in those weeks.
And if you definitely are thinking, if you're listening to this thinking, I haven't got time. If your immediate response is, I haven't got time, which is such a common response, isn't it, Brian?
Yeah.
I haven't got time for that. Go and do tip number one, go and do the time audit, because you need to find time, right? It is there. The time is there. You just need to find it. Something's got to go. Something's got to give. Prioritize that time. Do the audit first. And you'll find that you make time. You will make time.
So, Lyndsey, tell us a bit about how your week has been. What are you celebrating, and what are we celebrating with you this week?
So I think I was in life one week this week. So things were good. Things were quite normal. I'm gearing up for probably life 2 week next week. But this thing I'm celebrating this week is saying no to invites despite being flattered by them. So not just like, oh, this is a development opportunity for you, but actually, so I got invited to go to something overseas, which looks really sexy, looks like, oh yes, I'm overseas travel, great. No, like, I don't need that in my life right now.
No,
The
great.
thing that I would be going to do is not aligned to my values. It's not something that's going to get me where I want to be. So I said no. And I was so proud of myself, because I thought a previous Lyndsey would have been like, oh yeah, great. Get my suitcase out, off I go. No, it's back in the cupboard. Don't need that. Yeah. So
I love
really
that.
chuffed for
Well
that.
done. Well done. I love that. Such a lot of courage and really good boundaries in there.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, B?
So I definitely had a life 2 week last
Mm,
week. And so this week I have intentionally planned a life 1 week. So I took 2 days off at the start of the week.
good.
Uh, much to my team's joy
Yeah.
and praise. And so I took 1 day off just for myself and 1 day off with the kids. And it was really great. And it has meant that the rest of the week has felt a bit squeezed. But I wouldn't have made a different choice, because actually taking the time to refresh, to recover, having had a life 2 week, was more important than me, squeezing in, getting to inbox zero or going to an extra couple of meetings. I've just had to get rid of stuff, and that's been really good.
Yeah. Another good way to really kind of focus and prioritize your time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so what have you been learning this week then?
So learning, I think, well, I don't think, I know, and all my family, my partner, everyone will say, I'm someone that'll be like, oh, that'll take 10 minutes to do. No, it takes a long time. It takes like an hour and 10 minutes to do. I'm like, oh, that's a 10-minute job. And actually, I think the thing I've been learning this week with some of the projects that I've been working on at work is that actually some things do just take a lot longer to complete, but that's okay. Yeah. And you can go back and you can like look at the reasons as to maybe why the timescales have slipped. Because my instant reaction was to feel frustrated, to feel disappointed that things hadn't actually gone in the timescales that we expected them to. But actually, this week's been a big learning curve for me in terms of, just pause, reflect on kind of why, and accept that it's okay. It is absolutely okay that those things happen. So yeah, that's been a big learning for me for this week. How about you, B?
Yeah, so I love that because we both like checking things off the to-do list, don't we?
Yeah, and it was still on it and it was really irritating me.
So irritating, so close. So my learning for the week is a reminder to myself that difficult conversations are always going to be difficult conversations. And just because you as a leader get better at knowing that you need to have the conversation, that you need to have the feedback, that you need to address the problem, it doesn't mean that the conversation is any less tough. I think that you just get better at knowing, like, right, I'm going to intervene now, or I'm going to nip this in the bud there. And you have more skills for having the conversation. But the feelings about having it, I just find like they don't go away. I still feel anxious. I still feel worried. I'm still like ruminating a bit on it. Yeah. But
Yeah,
I did it.
it's
But I did it.
so true. It's so true. And I think that's so important, isn't it, for us at lead the room, because this isn't a kind of, there's not an end point. You don't become like an expert in this stuff in leadership. Like it will continue to be hard,
Yeah.
but that's okay. And it's experimenting. You try loads of different approaches because also you're using these approaches on different people. So
Yeah.
the response is going to be different, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think it really links to the growth I've seen this week because
Mm.
you know, like I said a couple of weeks ago, I've got this new app to help me manage my like my anxiety and my self-talk. And I can really already feel a bit of an improvement as I was approaching these tough conversations in just how I was like trying to encourage myself and cheerlead myself rather than criticize myself. So that was a
Okay.
good growth for me for the week.
Yeah, I like that. I had a kind of similar one in that I've definitely, I think, as I said, I'm definitely oh no, life's great, everything's fine. And I think particularly over the last year, I've definitely had to probably with friends open up a bit more and
Yeah.
be like, okay, this is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But actually go through it together and kind of grow and learn together. And so I've definitely been reaching out to more people because I do feel more comfortable in doing that now, whereas I didn't before. And actually seeing the benefits of that, not just for me, but for them as well, just to be like, oh, really glad that you've come to me. I think I've got like a lot I could offer you, which is really nice. So that's been a bit of a growth, growth area for me this week, and it will continue to.
And it really speaks to that kind of that skill under courage about vulnerability and the impact that vulnerability
Mm,
can have on people. Like when you go first and you role model vulnerability, what it
yes.
unlocks. And so yeah, that's something great to pick up in another episode. So
Yeah,
yeah, but well
absolutely.
done. That's really tough, and you've been really brave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully there's some really good tips in there. Please go and try them out, particularly if you're thinking this is a lot. I feel really, really close to burnout, or I don't want to ever experience what they've just described or what people describe as burnout is. Try and use those tips out. And we really hope that you find them helpful. Bryony, where can they find other information?
So you can come and look at www.leadtheroom.co.uk. Come and look at our website and you can find loads of free resources there. But if you want a real deep dive into auditing your time, into creating those habits, then you can rate and review the podcast. And as a huge thank you from us to you for doing that, we're going to send you our 90-day leadership refresh, which has got loads of great stuff in there besides just managing burnout and prioritizing your time. So do go and do that. And we will look forward to chatting with you next week. But in the meantime, let us know how you're getting on. Send us a DM. Drop us a comment on YouTube or send us an email at hello@leadtheroom.co.uk. We read everyone and we love hearing how you're getting on.
Yeah, cool. Take care and we'll see you next week. Bye. A team full of purpose and results, people who are buzzing with ideas and the courage to try them out, and a place where you and the team can't wait for the weekly meeting. By listening to this episode, you are building your skills to become the leader that can make all of this and more happen. But we want to hear from you. Tag us in your stories, send us a DM about your walk the week on Instagram so we can learn what's resonating with you most. And if you're up for helping us out and taking a moment to rate and review the podcast, send us a screenshot to hello@leadtheroom.co.uk so we can send you our 90-day leadership refresh as a thank you. Keep experimenting, and we can't wait to see you next week.